So like just say like one or two things, and then or like on the second ones just say like, oh, I saw how this in the pistol on us, and then another person can be like, yeah, I agree with you, like it was like this. Or if you had a different one, then you could say that.
Yeah.
Cool.
So does anyone want to start, or
yeah, I can start. I don't have the questions in front of me. Let me get the questions in front of me.
Okay. Well, I can just like read mine, like what I thought for what made them so successful from the beginning. And I put, it was at the very beginning of the video how they started like really making, their devices like the two-way pagers and stuff, like in the 90s, how they became pretty successful with that. And I think that they really like capitalized and became successful just because they made their good improvements over time, and they still like catered towards a certain group of people, like being the all the business professionals. And the question is like in the smartphone industry, so they had their clientele from the pagers, and then once they added that phone function, then they already had such a good audience to that would, they had the cult following, so to speak, so everyone would go and buy their phones then.
Yeah, I think like another thing that made them so successful at the beginning is they were being contracted in or out like by other companies to create processes and ways the systems worked, and so they ended up coming up with this messaging system. And so then they were an expert in the mobile messaging field, and then when it comes to smartphones, like that's, I mean, basically all they're trying to cater to is like
and the internet.
Yeah.
And they definitely too, just a tagline onto that was the security features that they had for government personnel. And they really didn't have in the beginning very much rivalry at all. Like no one was able to mimic what they were doing, which goes directly into the next portion where they just got kind of comfortable in their position.
Yeah, that's like for number 2, that's what I had put about like external factors. I thought immediately of the threat of substitutes with that. And how at the beginning, like you had just said, there really were none until the iPhone, but they weren't even like too worried about that at the beginning of it. So
yeah, they were just like, oh, that's no big deal, it's not going to be anything, like we're fine, we'll keep making our same phone, who wants like a touch screen. They just did a really poor job of like in the question it's like look at the 5 forces and the pestle analysis. So like in terms of like the pestle analysis technology forces, they really got outdone by other companies, and they just didn't even realize it. They didn't even want to look at it or think about it.
Adapt to it.
Yeah, so all of the other companies' technology just out the roof compared to them.
Yeah. And then too with that one, like social, because they were trying to like cater theirs towards business professionals, and so that's one thing with the iPhone. They were like, well, that's not really catered towards them, so it's not like our real estate, so it doesn't really matter. So I thought social could be applicable to that one also.
Yeah, that's what I actually thought, that one kind of trumped technology even a little. Because the technology fed into the sociocultural, because most of the general public that was now having access to the phones, they were less interested in the security features, which is what their core competency really was in the beginning. And they were more interested in the interface of the phone itself. And that's where the iPhone really just came in and kind of just swept it away from them.
Yeah, and then in the video it said too, like that, or another reason why they weren't so worried was because the iPhone cost so much compared to the BlackBerry. And then, obviously I think that kind of went out the window soon. Like they didn't really.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes into the sociocultural even more. People were willing to pay more for it.
Yeah.
having it being available less expensive, having the BlackBerry being less expensive wasn't, they thought it was like a core competency or something that they could bank on, or well, we're way cheaper. But it really wasn't in the end, because people were willing to pay for that status symbol or the
Yeah,
interface.
that's like, yeah. So I was about to say, like,
Yeah.
everything's like always, or probably especially back then, because now like pretty much everyone has a touchscreen smartphone, you know. So it's sort of like really nothing special. But back then, that was like the hot and flashy deal. So
Yeah.
And they really should have like seen it coming, or at least thought about it, because like even at the beginning, like they were really proud because like having a BlackBerry was a symbol to so many people. Like you were the powerful, like you
It's a
were
big
the
deal,
rich,
man.
you were in the business world. And then like iPhone came along and they're like, yeah, it's more expensive. People are kind of willing to pay for it. But like that's not gonna happen. Like even though they did that to every other phone
mhm.
Well, one of the
just
other factors
previously.
in that too was that the network effect. We can definitely put that in, because when the iPhone first came out, it was only available to AT&T users.
Oh yeah,
So they didn't pay as much attention to it, because they were like, wow, that's just AT&T. You know, everybody would have to switch to that company if they wanted to have an iPhone. And then iPhone opened up to everyone. So it was kind of like a lurk and grab or whatever, maybe.
Yeah. I feel like
and
they
so
definitely just ignored so much of those. Like,
What's
yeah, and then so that was mainly we just went with the pestle on that one, and well, I guess I started with the Five Forces Model one, but you know, we touched on like rivalry among existing competitors. There really was not a lot. Um, the threat of substitutes, you know, we talked about how there was a big threat and then they didn't really, you know, go or react to it. The new entrants, iPhone, that was a threat. Yeah. But oh, and then
yeah.
like not just to make it about iPhone, but like, you know, they in the video they talked about the droid, the Motorola droid, you know, how like the kick out keyboard, how that was like a big thing because it had, or like I saw that, I was like, oh, that's kind of like the best of both worlds if you want that, like if you want a physical keyboard but it also had the touch screen with it too. And you know, that also definitely probably played into their
Yeah, that's like an interesting thing to think about, like in today's age. Because now you say that, like I think back to whenever I like had my first phone, and it like had the touchscreen and the keyboard, and I thought I was the coolest. Like I thought I had the coolest phone in the entire world. So it's like
like
kind
that
of like
sidekick.
their niche was almost
the
stolen from
sidekick? Yeah.
them.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. I think my older sister had a Motorola Sidekick, and I was like, "That's the coolest thing I've ever seen," because it like spun around, like the screen spun around on it. Yeah,
So
Yeah, so like their niche was stolen. Like they thought, oh, we have the keyboard, like they only have the touch screen, and
mm.
then they said, well, we'll just completely steal that market.
How about
Mm,
both?
yeah.
Yeah. Trying to read through, make sure we don't miss anything. Uh, oh wait, that's an example.
I think we did pretty good on covering the first two. I think the last one is just provide 3 to 5 recommendations to the strategic leaders of BlackBerry to address the external factors that led to the fall of BlackBerry.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and another thing, like, you know, before we get into that, I pulled a quote because, you know, it went with one of the questions, but I think it was like right at the end, it had like a little tagline that it said, BlackBerry was so set in its ways that it cemented its own demise. And I think that kind of covers like so many of the different forces and different factors that we've like
Yeah.
covered on. It's like, you know, lack of action or lack of reaction. And that kind of, that in itself kind of summarized the whole video really well because, you know, it was talking about how it was like a super big powerhouse, you know, it had such a following in its early days. And then it just, you know, it's sort of like complacency in a way, you know, and it kind of summarized that because after it had gone back and forth with all the other different phones. But yeah, that was just to touch on that before because I have some notes here and I just want to make sure that I get them out there.
Yeah.
And I guess, I mean, with the other ones, we did sort of, we looked at all the negative ones. One thing that I had written down was like, and it's time, and I guess Riley, you said it too, like pioneer of mobile messaging with like their, what was it, BBM, BlackBerry Messenger or whatever.
Yeah, it was like BBM.
iMessage, you know?
Basically, yeah.
And so it was like, maybe that was like the first version of that in a way, because it was not just sending regular text messages, it was like its own IM sort of deal.
Yeah. And then they just didn't look out for those threats. Like, and another thing that I was looking at on like the pestle analysis though is there's like an economic section. Do y'all have any insight into like the any economic conditions that would have like I can't remember, but like were economic conditions like really good during their demise?
I mean, I think, well, because like, I know in the video it talked about like when the iPhone 4 came out, and I'll look at that. I'll see when the iPhone 4 came out, because that was like the nail in the coffin for them.
Yeah, because I was thinking like maybe they thought since they were so affordable, like they came out maybe around like early 2000s, 2006, 2008, like that time. And like people were kind of looking for a deal, you know, like economic conditions weren't great. But then,
that makes you think of like, you know, the recession, like 2009, like the housing market crash. And
yeah. But then after that, like I'm sure like people were willing to pay more because things got better and they just didn't really adjust, I guess.
The iPhone came out in 2007, this says, so I don't know. And then it had it had different graphs on it about like, well, I guess those were just like sales figures really about, you know, when iPhone had surpassed BlackBerry, then like went back down, and then like, you know, surpassed them and like stayed on the top. So
it was probably around the recession. So like it went way up 2007 and then down 2008, 2009. And they're like, oh, we're good. You know, iPhone's not getting us. But really, it's just a recession. No one can afford an iPhone. So I think that's another thing that they just didn't really look out for, like people's economic opportunities over the years and how that affect the number of phones iPhone sold and the number of phones or number of other smartphones versus the number of their smartphones.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna try and find that. I have it pulled up over here real quick, because that's, you know, I didn't think about it like that.
I hadn't thought about it until I was here. So like, do y'all know?
Here it is. Wait a second. So, oh yeah, I mean, it's kind of like what you said. BlackBerry stayed like pretty steady through it all, and then it fell off in March of 2011. But you know, the recession was like 2009, and there was like a huge hit to Apple sale, or like iPhone sales.
Yeah.
The shipments on here in 2009.
I think that's when they opened up to be available to more than just AT&T. That was their launch.
Oh, okay.
In 2011.
Yeah. So. Oh, and the 2011 one. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Then that makes a whole lot of sense.
So there were like a lot of factors that went together for Apple being like coming out on top after a recession, but BlackBerry just didn't look at those economic factors and factor them into sales of theirs versus sales of a more expensive item.
Yeah, no, I didn't think about that. That was good. But yeah, that's like right at 2009. But it's just weird, you know, because like the iPhone took such a big hit in 2009, and this graph shows that BlackBerry was still like going up.
Yeah, probably. I mean, because it was so affordable, you know, like
yeah.
They're like, we need a cell phone that can do all this stuff, but we can't afford to pay for
the touch screen. All
this one over here, yeah.
Now I wonder if there's any other graphs in here that we can look at. Oh, there's another one. Global smartphone market share by BlackBerry. So yeah, they were like at the top. I wonder what like when the iPhone became available to all providers. Like what quarter? Because this chart has They're broken down by like quarters. I'm not sure,
Didn't
but
they normally release it
do what?
in the fall? Like, aren't normally Apple's releases
Yeah.
in the fall?
Yeah, so that'd be like 3,
3 or
yeah,
4.
yeah. So you see like a huge hit where like before BlackBerry was at like 20% of like the whole world smartphone market share, and then it went down real quick. So like in 2011, it was at like 7, 6, quickly down to like 5. So yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, that was good. I didn't think about that relation.
Yeah,
there,
me either.
so.
It's interesting though.
Yeah. And so I guess that puts us on number 3 now with recommendations.
Yeah. What did y'all come up with for that?
For recommendations, so I wasn't sure if it was like at what point in time, because the question says during external factors that led to the fall of BlackBerry. Like it seemed like the questions wanted to be during that time. But it would definitely be what we've been saying, which would be to react sooner, to try to appeal more to new users rather than just existing customers. Yeah, that's the main points that I had for that one in that time frame.
I would say they like really need to get on board with some research and development. I mean, depending on, you know, whenever we're supposed to be analyzing, like making recommendations to their leaders, like they just stayed stagnant, like what you said. They didn't do any research and new development at all. And like they really should have done like a SWOT analysis. Like I'm not really sure who their managers were who didn't analyze all this stuff. But like they really should have seen like some threats from other people and some weaknesses on the inside, and just some missed opportunities that they should have taken.
Yeah, I just looked it up, and a tweet from like the parent company, which is TCL, said that it will no longer be selling BlackBerry branded phones as of August 31, 2020. And so like we just passed that. So that's
wow.
Too.
I think they're moving into software and automotive technologies. Like they're trying to pair with other companies.
Yeah, probably not the best choice buying BlackBerry, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, because even like the last with like I'm looking at it right here, it looks like pretty much an iPhone, but just has like the keyboard, like a physical keyboard, like right there. Looks kind of silly now, but
yeah.
And I guess like a recommendation that I can think. Well, I mean, I guess we've already said it, right? But like, yeah, I mean, it's already been said. Never mind. I guess like the big thing was just reaction.
Yeah, I'm down.